This week we're at the Hiller Aviation Museum in San Carlos, and as you can see, it's just filled with amazing aircraft. You may not realize it, but many of aviation's milestones were accomplished right here in Northern California. Tonight we're going to talk about some of those pioneers and get a peek at some of these fantastic machines. The Hiller Aviation Museum has a significant collection of early aircraft, and here to tell us about some of these fantastic machines is its Vice President of Operations, Willie Turner. Mr. Turner, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's our pleasure. Thank you for visiting us.
Oh, we are so excited to be here. This place is just filled with fascinating flying contraptions, and we're standing in front of them here. This is John Montgomery's Evergreen glider. Tell us about Mr. Montgomery.
Mr. Montgomery was a pioneer in this area. As a matter of fact, a pioneer in the world. He was the first to achieve controlled flight, manned-controlled flight, but not powered, in 1883. And he did it in his Gull glider. And then he had other gliders that he built, the 1905 Santa Clara glider, and then the 1911 Evergreen glider. And the 1911 Evergreen glider was flown right where the junior college is today in Evergreen, down in San Jose. And there's a giant monument attributed to him because that's where he unfortunately also ended his life in a mishap crash. But he was a true pioneer to the point where in 1883, after his flights, he wrote many papers. He was a professor at the University of Santa Clara. And the Wright brothers there's debate whether they did or did not actually study his work, but the mere fact that they mentioned him and his work, and that their gliders in 1903 definitely resembled his gliders of 1883.
Now, the thing that he developed was the wing structure. Tell us a little bit about what was different about his wing.
Well, we call it a parabolic wing, and he had the curvature, which is required to achieve lift. And he got that by studying seagulls. And he'd go to the beach as a young boy, and he drew pictures of them. And then later, as he became a professor at the University of Santa Clara, he was able to do the engineering and develop the parabolic wing that achieved the lift in 1883.
Now, he was a professor, as you said, at Santa Clara, and his students helped him to build a glider called the Santa Clara. Tell us a little bit about that glider.
That's right. They built the glider in 1905, and they called it the Santa Clara, and they would take it to festivals, fairs, that type of thing, and they would get a hot air balloon, and they would fill the hot air balloon with hot air and then rise up over the crowd as high as 4,000 feet sometimes, and then he'd cut himself loose. And the pilot was actually a circus aerobat named Maloney, and he would glide down over the fairs or the festivals and so forth, and it was the first time anybody would have ever seen somebody fly.
We're standing in front of quite an elaborate aircraft, and it's a really famous one. Tell us about this.
Well, this is a Curtiss Pusher, and it was flown by Eugene Ely, who was the first person to ever successfully land and take off on a ship, basically starting naval aviation.
And that was here?
That was right here in the San Francisco Bay in 1911. Eugene Ely took off from Tan Fran Airport, which was basically a racetrack right by where SFO is today, and circled over Oyster Point, and then landed on the USS Pennsylvania, which was moored right off of Goat Island, which is Yerba Buena Island, and now Treasure Island, right next to it.
And now, what did he land on? Was there room on the deck for this?
Well, there were no decks, that's right. It was a cruiser, so they built a 30-foot wide by 130-foot long deck, and they put the sailors' sea bags, filled them with sand, and laid rope across them, and then they hung a meat hook from the bottom of the airplane. And at 10:35 on January 18th, 1911, which we're coming up on the 100th-year anniversary, Eugene Ely made the first naval trap.
Amazing. So with a meat hook, he was able to...
With a meat hook. He caught the 13th wire and stopped about 3 yards from the smokestack of the ship.
Well, tell us about the designer of this plane.
Well, the designer was Glenn Curtiss, and Glenn Curtiss was a true icon in early aviation. He took what the Wright brothers did and then made it better. And his designs with aircraft, he made seaplanes and aerobatic airplanes and military airplanes, and he was a very successful aircraft designer.
Willie, can you tell us what we see around here?
Well, this is a Boeing 747-100 series, 1970. It was owned and flown by British Airways. And then when they retired it a few years ago, we found out about it, and we shipped a crew out to Roswell, New Mexico, where they did the dismantling of it. Made sure there were no aliens on board, and cut it up, and then brought it, the front half here, back to San Francisco. It took us about a week to get it here. And then United Airlines helped us put it back together. And it is a full cockpit of a 747 that people can get in and see what it's like to be a captain of a 747.
And you can't really do that anymore. The captains can't invite you in, can
That's
they?
right, yeah. Since 9/11, you can't get in the cockpits of airliners anymore just to see them. And so this is a public's opportunity to see what it's like and how an airplane actually works.
Now, the 747s have a new mission. Can you tell me about Sophia?
Well, Sophia is built by NASA, and it is a 747-100 series, just like this one. But what they did is they put a large hole in the side of it and put a door in it and a telescope. So they can climb up to 45,000 plus feet and get very clear images from there as opposed to the Earth's atmosphere when they're on the ground. So they take pictures of it from the air.
Wow, and then they record those images on board and they're ready to deliver when they get back?
Right, they have a full recording and lab on the aircraft, and so they're able to download those images, and then when they land, then they can give them to NASA.
We want to talk a little bit about Stanley Hiller, who made helicopters. Tell us a little about Mr. Hiller.
Well, Stanley Hiller Jr. was an amazing man. He built and flew his first helicopter on the West Coast to ever fly in 1944 at the tender age of 19 years old, and he did it over in Cal Stadium, right there in Berkeley.
So that was the first helicopter to fly on the West Coast?
That's right, yeah, the very first one. And the reason why they did it at Cal was it's the only place they could find a fence big enough to hide this top secret project he was working on.
So he had to teach himself? He figured it out all on his own?
He had to teach himself how to fly, because in those days there was no helicopter pilots around. The only person doing it on the East Coast was Sikorsky, and he wasn't talking. So he had to first figure out how to build his own helicopter and then how to teach himself how to learn how to fly his own helicopter. And we have a lot of pictures of him on his nose, on his side, crashing a lot. But eventually he became a very good helicopter pilot.
Now, he wanted everyone to be a helicopter pilot, didn't he?
Well, at one point, being a good young entrepreneur, he thought that everybody should own a helicopter. Later on in his years, he got thinking, he saw the roads and all the congestion. That would not be a good idea in the sky. So his most successful helicopters were his military helicopters around the Korea vintage.
So they were built for rescue, right?
That's right. Yeah, they had what they call litters on them. They would put the wounded soldiers in the sides of the helicopter on the litters and then fly them to the MASH units, the makeshift hospitals.
So he had another kind of rescue helicopter in a capsule. Can you tell us a little about that one?
Well, he designed one helicopter for downed helicopter pilots, and they could actually drop it from an airplane behind enemy lines and under 5 minutes put it's called a rotor cycle together and then fly it to safety.
Handy helicopter to have on a ride. Stop by the Hiller Aviation Museum and take a look for yourself at the Hiller helicopters and all of the really fantastic aircraft that's housed here.